my first topic is second language learning and language teaching styles. This chapter looks at some general questions of teaching methodology in the light of SLA research. It also provides an overview of the diversity of alternative language teaching methods that teachers should be aware of, if only to remind them that there are many successful ways in which languages can be taught. The term teaching method is used in most of this book as a broad cover term for the different activities that go on in language teaching. To avoid the various associations and prejudices that these terms conjure up, I prefer the more neutral terms teaching techniques and teaching style, which will be used in this chapter. The actual point of contact with the students is the teaching technique. Thus, a structured drill in which students intensively practice a structure is one technique. Dictation is another. Information gap exercises another, and so on. A technique, as Clark 1984 puts it, is a label for what we do as teachers. Teachers combine these techniques in various ways within a particular teaching style. Put a structured drill with a repetition dialogue and a role play, and you get the audiolingual style with its dependence on the spoken language, on practice, and on structure. Put a functional drill with an information gap exercise and a role play, and you get the communicative style, with its broad assumptions about the importance of communication in the classroom. A teaching style is a loosely connected set of teaching techniques believed to share the same goals of language teaching and the same views of language teaching and of second language learning. This chapter looks at 6 main teaching styles. We have the academic teaching style, which is common in academic classrooms. We have also the audiolingual style that emphasizes structured oral practice. We have the communicative style that aims at interaction between people, both in the classroom and outside. We have the task-based learning style that gets students doing tasks. We have also the mainstream TFL style, which combines aspects of the others. And finally, we have the other styles that look beyond language itself. These 6 styles are loose labels for a wide range of teaching rather than clear-cut divisions. The first 4 are arranged in a roughly chronological order, with the oldest style first. The range of styles demonstrate the idea that no single form of teaching suits all students and all teachers. Teachers should always remember that despite the masses of advice they are given, they have a choice. All of these methods, techniques, and styles are still available for people to use, regardless of whether they are in fashion or not. Indeed, it is doubtless true that never a day goes by when they are not already in use successfully somewhere in the world. The first style that we are going to talk about is the academic style of teaching. This is a very common in classroom settings. Its focusing questions are: creating grammar explanation should ever be the focus of the lesson. Creating translate text is usually a classroom activity for the student. And do you see any value literary texts that have deep meanings? In the academic style of language teaching, its teaching techniques are explanation, translation, text, and its goal is directly individual learning of the second language as an academic subject, and also indirectly ability to use language. Type so that it targeted is those students that are academically gifted and older students. Its learning assumption is acquisition of conscious grammatical language and its conversion to use. While its classroom assumption is that it is a formal and teacher-controlled. There are also some weaknesses from a second language acquisition research perspective. We have inadequate use of the grammar, and also it is inefficient as a means of teaching language use. But also, there are suggestions for teaching. The first one is use it with academic students who have individual goals of self-development rather than international or local goals. Another one is supplement it with other components and processes of language. The third one is to remember to develop the powerful individual goals for the students rather than be carried away by the sheer knowledge of grammar. The next style is the audiolingual style of teaching. Focusing questions are: do you think language learning is a matter of acquiring habits? And we have if speech has necessarily to be taught in writing. This kind of style or this style of teaching its emphasis is on teaching the spoken language through dialogues and drills. Its view of language language learning is that language is doing things, not knowing things. Audiolingual style of teaching has typical teaching techniques like dialogues, because in a typical lesson in an audiolingual style, it starts with a dialogue. So the students listen to the dialogue as a whole, either played back from a tape or read by the teacher, and then they repeat it sentence by sentence, and then they act it out. It is also followed by the structure drill, in which they practice grammatically points connected with the dialogue, such as the polite questions used in requests like could I, may I, and last one we have the exploitation activities. This is to make the students incorporate the language in their own use. Its goal the goal of the audiolingual style is to get the students to behave in common second language situations, such as, for example, as the station or the supermarket. It is concerned with the real life activities the students are going to face. The type of students here in this style is not defined. So the style is not restricted to the academically gifted. So the type of student here is non-analytical and non-academic. In its learning assumptions, it is the habit formation or behaviorist theory. Why? Because this learning style is often referred to as habit formation. So language is a set of habits, just like a driving car. So a habit is learned by doing it time to time and again. So the dialogues concentrate on unconscious structures rather than the conscious rules of the academic style. Its classroom assumptions, it is teacher-controlled classroom. As for the weaknesses from a SLA research perspective, it is inadequate form of grammar. There is also no position on other aspects of language or use, and there is inefficiency of habit formation as a means of teaching communicative use. As for the suggestions for teaching, it is used for teaching certain aspects of language only. So we should be aware of the underlying audiolingual basis of many everyday techniques. Let's proceed with the communicative style. Its focusing questions are: what do you understand by communication? Do you think this is what students need. We have also here, to what extent do you think the classroom is an educational setting of its own? To what extent simply a preparation for situations outside? This communicative style is seen as the fundamental rationale for language teaching. Indeed, communicative teaching has now become the only teaching method that many teachers have experienced. It is the traditional method from the 20th century, as grammar or translation was the traditional method from the 90th. The starting point for this style was redefining what the student had to learn in terms of communicative competence rather than linguistic competence, social language rather than mental language. So for this style, its typical teaching techniques are, first we have the information gap exercise. In this, students look at an example of this is students look at one or the other set of photos, and they have to discover what the differences are, if any, by talking to each other without looking at the other set. The next one is the role play. So in this, students improvise conversations around an issue without the same contrived information gap. And for the task, students carry out tasks in the classroom with a definite outcome. For example, here, they have to listen to a deep conversation, and they have to take how many times they hear the words why and because. Then they listen again to find out specific reasons. In pairs, they compare their answers, and after the teacher has given a model conversation, they role play equivalent conversations about asking for things and giving reasons. So its goal is getting students to interact with other people in the second language. So it is in the classroom or outside the classroom. Its type of students here is field independent students rather than field dependent students, and it also targeting extroverts rather than introverts because they have to interact with other people. And also it is more on less academic students rather than academic students. For its learning assumptions, it is learning by communicating with other students in the classroom or laissez-faire. So it, in a way, this style has a laissez-faire because learning takes place in the student's mind in ways that teachers cannot control. As for its classroom assumptions, teacher serves as organizer and not source of language knowledge. For the weaknesses from a SLA research perspective, it lacks of use on discourse processes and communication strategies. It is also a black box model of learning. So another weakness is its lack of role for the use of the phrase language. So for the suggestions for teaching, we should use this style with appropriate students in appropriate circumstances. We should also supplement with other components of language and avoid trivialization of content and aims. Another style is the task-based learning style of teaching. Its focusing questions are: what is the ideal way of organizing what students do in the classroom? Another one is: what relationship does what happens in the classroom have to the world outside the classroom? In the everyday sense of the word task, all language teaching consists of tasks, whether these are translation tasks, structure drill tasks, or information gap tasks. A teacher's job is to set up things for the students to do in the classroom. According to the definition, a task requires learners to use language. Students are learning the language by using it, taken over from the communicative style. This implies that learning is the same as processing, reminiscent of Russian thinking. The second part of the definition is that a task has an emphasis on meaning. The teaching focus is not on the structure, language functions, vocabulary items, etc. of earlier approaches, but on the meaning of what is said. Hence, structured drills count as exercises, not as tasks, since they do not involve meaning. The last part of the definitions requires the students to use language to attain a goal. The point of the task is not to master a specific language point, but to achieve a particular non-language goal. There has to be an outcome to the task which the students do or do not achieve. For this learning style of teaching, its typical teaching techniques is meaning-based task with definite outcomes, and for its goals is on fluency, accuracy, and complexity. On the type of student that it caters it is possibly more on the less academic students. For its learning assumptions, language acquisition takes place through meaning-based. So meaning it focuses more on the meaning or meaning-based tasks with a specific short-term goal. And as for the classroom assumptions, teaching depends on organizing tasks based on meaning with specific outcomes. We will now proceed on its weaknesses from a SLA research perspective. First is it lacks of wider engagement with goals, learner groups, and etc. It also lacks of a role for first language, and it is reliance on a processing model as opposed to a learning model. For its suggestions for teaching, we should use it in conjunction with the other styles, not as a style on its own. So it will also depend, or we will conjunct it with the other styles, and it is useful as a way of planning and preparing lessons. The fifth style is the mainstream EFL style of language teaching. Its focusing questions are: what does the word situation mean to you in language teaching? How much do you think a teacher can mix different teaching styles? So, the mainstream style of teaching developed in British influenced EFL from the 1930s. It is mostly reflected a compromise between the academic and the audiolingual styles, combining say techniques of grammatical explanation with technical of automatic practice. Until the 1970s, this early mainstream style was characterized by the term situation in two senses. The first one is language was to be taught through demonstration in the real classroom situation. In this, teachers rely on the props, gestures, and activities that are possible in real classroom. So another one, or in the other sense of situation, language teaching was to be organized around the language of the real life situations the students would encounter, like for example the railway station, the hotel, and etc. So in this style of language teaching, A lesson using the mainstream EFL style starts with a presentation phase in which the teacher introduces new structures and vocabulary. It is one of the typical teaching techniques. Next is the next stage of the lesson usually involves a short dialogue. So in this case, it might be a job interview that includes several examples of can. For example, can you drive a car, or can I speak 3 languages? So the students listen to the dialogue and they repeat parts of it, and they are asked questions about it, and so on. And they may see a substitution, or that allows students to create new sentences under tight control. So we have also the goal of this style, in which it is getting students to know and use the language. So it's type of students that it targeting is anyone or any. Its learning assumptions are understanding, practice, and also the use. And as for the classroom assumption, it is the both teacher-controlled full classes and internal small groups. We will now proceed with the weaknesses from a SLA research perspective, because it is a combination of other styles as I have mentioned a while ago, and it lacks of role from the first language. Also, it drawbacks of mixture of styles. And for the suggestions for teaching, do not worry about the mixture of different sources. Always remember that even this rich mixture still does not cover all aspects relevant to second language teaching. So the last style is the other styles. So its focusing questions are: to what extent do you think teaching should aim to make students better people? And how would you strike the balance in language teaching between the students' independence and the teacher's control? So other teaching styles have been proposed that mark a radical departure from those outlined earlier, either in their goals or in their execution. So it is difficult to call this by a single name. So some have been called alternative methods, but this suggests there is a common conventional method to which they provide an alternative, and they are themselves united in their approach. So also some are referred to as humanistic methods because of their links to humanistic psychology. But this label suggests religious or philosophical connections that are mostly inappropriate. And also, others are called self-access or self-directed learning. For its typical teaching techniques, we have the CLL, or Community Language Learning. This is derived from the work of Charles Curran. So in this, picture out a beginner's class in which the students sit in a circle from which the teacher is excluded. So one student starts the conversation by remarking, "Were the buses terrible this morning?" in his first language. So the teacher translates this into the language the students are learning, and the students repeat it. So another student answers, "When do the buses ever run on time?" in her
first language also, which is then translated again by the teacher and repeated by the students. And the conversation between the students proceeds in this way. So in this style, the teacher records the translations and later uses them for conventional practice such as audiolingual drilling or academic explanation. So we have also the Suggestopedia, Confluent Language Teaching and Self-Directed Learning. For its goal is individual development of potential and self-selected. So this style goal is to develop the students' potential and to enable them to come alive through second language learning, not to help them directly to communicate with others outside the group. So we have also here the type of student. It is those with personal motivations. For its learning assumption, it is diverse and mostly learning by doing. So they have to do it for them to learn it. So it is also using a processing model. As for its classroom assumptions, we have learners' freedom of choice, and it is usually for small groups. And for the weaknesses from a SLA research perspective, it is either no view of learning or idiosyncratic views. Also, it has little attention to learner variation. And for suggestions for teaching, it is a reminder of the importance of the students failing. So we have to take, or we have to look or give importance of what our students feeling. And we should open discussions with students over their needs and preferences.
So my next report is all about technology for learning. In her ebook Learning to Go, Shelly Sanchez includes an activity called Let's Go Viral. In the activity, which is designed to last for 2 class periods, the students watch a video on YouTube and consult various online resources in order to create a viral video. A viral video is a video which spreads across the internet like wildfire, so that in a very short spare of time, a large number of people see it. Let's Go Viral in many ways, an example of all that is current and exciting about the digital world that we and our students inhabit. In the first place, the activity is available in an ebook, which is read not in print, but on a mobile device or computer screen. Secondly, it is one on increasing number of bring your own technology or device, where students use whatever electronic items they have with them, like phones or tablets. For example, Let's Go Viral asks the students to interact with a medium like video, which far from being a specialist undertaking as it once was, is now used by everybody and can easily be publicized to anybody via internet-based technology. And now, when they have made their video, the students can share their efforts almost instantly with anyone on the planet, provided that they have internet connection. It is true that videos which our students produce can be shared extremely quickly, and maybe, just maybe, they will go viral and millions of people will see them. But if we forget for a moment this ability to share instantly with the world, the activity itself is not so radically different from the kind of playwriting and other performance projects that teachers have been using for decades. It involves thought, planning, collaborative learning, listening and watching, writing, and rehearsing before a final public performance. How widespread is the kind of technology that lets go viral depends on. In some classrooms around the world, you walk in and see data projectors and interactive whiteboards with built-in speakers for audio material that is delivered directly from a computer and hard disk or the internet. Or perhaps the students are all working on their mobile devices, and whenever their teachers want them to find anything out, they can use a search engine like Google, and the results can be shown to the whole class on the interactive whiteboard. In other classes, there is a whiteboard in the classroom, an overhead projector, and a CD player, or even, still in some places, a tape recorder. Other schools only have a whiteboard or perhaps a blackboard, often not in very good condition. In such schools, there may well not be any copying facilities, though the students will have notebooks even if they do not have a course book. Finally, there are some classroom situations where neither the teacher nor the students have anything at all in terms of educational technology or other learning aids. Jill and Charlie Hadfield represented these differing realities in a reverse pyramid of resources. In a world in which the pace of technological change is breathtakingly fast, it can sometimes seem that being at the bottom of the pyramid is a bar to language learning. However, as Jill and Charlie Hadfield argue passionately, this is not the case. There is a lot you can do with a minimal or even no resources. For example, in one situation they taught in, there was a board and the children had notebooks. But apart from that, there were no educational aids, not even course books. Nevertheless, with the help of a washing line and clothes peg, they were able to hang up pictures for the students to work with. Simple objects like a selection of pebbles became the focus for activities such as telling the story of the pebbles' existence. Different words from sentences were written on the pieces of paper or card and put on the students' bags, and the rest of the class had to make them stand in order to make a sentence from the words. Paper bags with faces drawn on them became puppets. The classroom desks were rearranged to become a street plan so that the student could practice giving and responding to directions. Finally, and most importantly, the students themselves were used as source material, whether as participants in quizzes about the real world, as informants in discussions about families, or as imaginers of river scenes based on teacher description. The internal world of the student is the richest, deepest seam of gold that you have. Indeed, Jill and Charlie Hadfield proposed turning the pyramid the other way up. Teachers, the Hadfields were suggesting, do not need all the amazing and frequently extremely expensive digital and other technological resources that are currently available in order to be successful. Or, as someone recently said to me, if you can't teach with just a stick in the desert, then you can't really teach at all. What then should teachers decide about when and how to use the innermost range of classroom technology that is available? There are the questions which this chapter seeks to answer. What is on offer? There is almost no end to the equipment that teachers and students can use in the classroom. The following list is not exhaustive, but it sets out areas where decisions have to be made. The first one are boards. This is the most common feature of any classroom. Blackboards, which are sometimes green, are used in combination with chalk, while we use marker pens to write on the shiny surface of whiteboards. We use similar pens too to write on flip charts with their large tier of pieces of paper. Interactive whiteboards, sometimes called smartboards, have changed things considerably since their introduction some years ago. They can be written on with special interactive pens or in some models with the use of our fingers. They can be connected to the internet or having a software such as Coursebook embedded in the computer device to which they are attached. As a result, they can show imported or included pictures and photographs. They can also broadcast video and audio material. Things that have been written on the board can be saved digitally, and pictures, diagrams, and text can be dragged around the board, also with the use of our fingers and interactive pen. The second one is the projection. A common projection solution for many teachers and learners is to have a standalone projector which can be connected to a computer or mobile device. This is such the tablet computer. In this way, anything that is seen on any of those devices like documents, pictures, videos can be projected onto the wall or a screen. In other classrooms around the world, it is still possible to see an overhead projector where material written on printed or transparencies can be projected onto the wall, but this is becoming increasingly rare. The next are the audio devices. Most audio material is nowadays broadcast from computers, from mobile devices, including MP3 players, or from interactive whiteboards, where audio script extracts can, for example, be highlighted so that only part of the audio is played. Some teachers still use CD players, though these are less convenient and less easy to manipulate. There are also various internet devices and applications for recording voices. Another one to offer are mobile devices. Teachers and students are increasingly making use of the mobile devices that so many of us use in our ordinary lives outside the classroom. Thus, mobile phones and tablet computers can be harnessed for teaching and learning purposes, whether the students are doing exercises, watching or listening to things, communicating with each other, or playing games. The main advantage of these devices is that many students already have them, and that they can, as their name suggests, be carried around. The last one are the cards, dice, rods, and puppets. Classroom teachers have always used smaller teaching and learning aids to help students study languages. For example, the use of flashcards, where it has words or pictures on them that can be held up for the students to see. Smaller cards or strips of paper can be used by individuals or small groups who might, for example, be asked to use them to put sentences in order, or they might have pictures on one side and the word on the other for testing and games. There will always be a place for realia or the actual objects such as fruit, real or plastic, keys, watches, or even stones. For many students, especially in the early stages of learning, the sight of real things is immensely reassuring. Dice are also often used in games, and some teachers use Cuisinart rods or the small pieces of wood of different lengths and colors to show things such as sentence order or sentences and word stress. Teachers of young learners often use puppets for dialogues and to help their students develop empathy and explore issues. Children often find it easier to express themselves if they are talking to or pretending to be puppets. Now let's proceed with internet connectivity. When classrooms have internet connectivity, many exciting possibilities are opened up. Whether the equipment being used is a central computer, a number of different computer terminals, or even the mobile devices which the students have brought to their lessons. We will talk about video communication. It is on platforms like Skype, FaceTime, or Adobe Connect. In this, it allows people to communicate while seeing each other in real time. This can be extremely useful for a student-to-student communication, but also for individual coaching between the teacher and the student. In the latter situation, there is sometimes a great equality between teacher and student in comparison to a physical classroom where the roles of learners and teachers tend to be more fixed. This platform can also be used to bring a visitor to a lesson. Next are apps and websites. There is a wide variety of applications available for smartphones and other mobile devices some of which have been designed especially for language learning. However, many non-language teaching apps can also be used for learning. There are countless language practice websites, and many language courses have special sites, such as electronic homework sites where the students can do practice activities and take tests related to the course book they are using, and where the teachers can track their students' progress without having to do a great deal of marking because the software does it for them. We will now proceed with the virtual worlds. Some educational institutions have held lessons in virtual worlds such as Second Life. In such worlds, the students are represented by avatars who can move, speak, and interact with the other students' avatars. In virtual worlds, simulated realities can be created so that the students can find themselves almost anywhere, from an airport, queue, to a party, from a meeting room to a clothing store. Language learning can thus be real-time and immersive, and the students can engage in a form of task-based learning. This other identity can also help the students to express themselves with greater confidence. The next one is gaming. Although not designed for language learning, gaming is now taken seriously by educators. In the world outside the classroom, many people worry about the long hours that young people spend at their screens and game consoles. Often, it appears to the detriment of their social interactions. Some educators are convinced that, on the contrary, game is very good for learning. This is because it is goal-oriented and people learn as they progress through a game's different stages, being rewarded as they do so, because it includes aspects of repetition but demands flashes of creativity, and because it develops cumulative knowledge. If these aspects can be harnessed for goal-oriented task-based language learning, then this can only be beneficial. Let's proceed with the next one, data analytics and adaptive learning. In the marketing world, digital software allows systems to track an individual's progress and preference, what they buy, where they go, and how long they spend there. This data is what corporations use to try to ensure that they target people with advertisements which match individual preferences and lifestyles. In exactly the same way, computers can measure when a language student does an exercise or task online, how long it takes them, how often they repeat it, and what they find most difficulty or easy. That way, the program they are using can decide what they should do next, tailoring everything to the individual student needs. Welcome to the world of adaptive learning. Now let's talk about technology issues. Because all classroom equipment and technology costs money and takes time to use, we need to be clear about some of the issues that surround the adoption of anything new, so that we can come to sensible conclusions about whether or not to adopt it, and how to incorporate it into our teaching if we do. It is nearly impossible to discuss the use of technology without mentioning the work of Mark Prensky, who some time ago coined the terms digital native to describe someone who grew up in a digital age, and digital immigrant to describe someone who was already alive when the digital revolution happened, and so had to learn how to use what it had to offer. Some immigrants, especially in education, Prensky claimed were letting down their young students because digital immigrant instructors who speak an outdated language are struggling to teach a population that speaks an entirely new language. It was high time, he argued, for the immigrants to stop their browsing and just do it, by which he meant start using digital devices and taking advantage of the opportunities offered by the digital world. For Mark Prensky, the dominant factor was age and the point where people first came into contact with digital technology. But there are two other dualities which are in today's world perhaps more important. The first is the visitors and residents. Digital visitors are people who access the digital world from time to time when they have a need for it, but who are not permanently hooked up to their computers or mobile devices. while digital residents are people who spend a lot of their time living and interacting online and who view the social interactions and relationships they encounter there as being important. 25 years after the invention of the World Wide Web, its inventor Tim Berners-Lee suggests that access to the internet is far from available to all. Research suggests that more than 60% of the world's population do not use the web at all. There have been many attempts to address this particular digital divide. Most notably, perhaps, is the Uruguay's Plan CEBAL, where all children in primary school have been given free laptop computers, and perhaps even more importantly, none of them is ever more than 300 meters away from free broadband. Such initiatives are rare. However, and the fact remains that the digital world is not inhabited by all, although exponential growth is connected mobile phone usage is changing web access dramatically. Let's proceed with the digital literacy. Just because most children grow up in a digital world, it doesn't mean that they will become digital experts. They are surrounded by books too. But not all of them will become successful readers and writers unless they are helped to learn how to do and appreciate these things. That is, unless we help them to become literate. Literacy doesn't only confine to being able to read and write. In a digital age, there are other literacies too that we must acquire if we want to operate successfully on the internet. Even the apparently simple act of searching on the internet can be greatly enhanced if people do it in a more sophisticated and effective way. There are other digital literacies that has also been proposed. The first one is understanding how blogs are written and structured and what sort of language is appropriate for a blog. The next is using hypertext. We have also filtering out unnecessary information in order to focus more on what is important. This is information literacy. Another one is the knowing how to combine and mix different media like video mixed with text and embedded in blogs. And lastly, knowing about online privacy and safety. The most important thing here is that we need to make sure that our students, especially younger learners, are aware of issues to do with personal safety and security. Such concerns are just as important when using classroom technology as they are in the other aspects of our teaching. When using any technology, old or new, we have to be conscious of exactly who is doing what. For example, in the past, it's sometimes seen as if the only person who used the board was the teacher. A board, which is always and only used by the teacher, appears to be a piece of technology which has been commanded for transmission teaching only. But of course, students can use boards too. They can write on them, stick things on them, draw on them, and etc. With the interactive whiteboards or the smart boards, they can also drag objects around and sometimes control what they are doing from their desk using wireless keyboards, mouse, and clickers. With so much technology and so many new software options available, it is sometimes difficult for teachers, directors of study, and curriculum planners to know how to make choices. Almost everything sounds wonderful, right? And there is a temptation. Sometimes to think that all teaching and learning problems can be resolved with the purchase of a new piece of hardware or a change over to some new software-powered procedures. The issue here for decision makers is that many of new technology solutions, which are offered and updated on an almost daily basis, are indeed very attractive. However, to adopt any one of them would require time, how to make the best use of it. It is not just a question of being seduced by something which looks wonderful and exciting. However, before committing money or time to something that has appealed to us, we need to be very clear-headed about what we are doing and why. We need to think rationally and constructively about buying or using new classroom equipment of any kind. And the following 6 questions highlight some of the consideration that everyone should apply. These questions are relevant not just to technology, of course, but also to any methodology, procedure, course book, or program that is offered to teachers. First question is the pedigree. We need to know where a new idea or piece of equipment comes from. Do its originators have a good educational track record in the field? A good rule of thumb is always to be suspicious. For examples of websites where you cannot find out who is responsible for them. We are not suggesting that all new ideas have to come from tried and trusted designers or publishers. On the contrary, new players can offer new and exciting possibilities, but we still need to know who makes this thing and what their motives are. This is partly because of question number 2. The next question is, who benefits? If we adopt this new methodological procedure or buy this new computer or interactive whiteboard, who will be the beneficiary of our investment of time or money? If we can be sure that our student will benefit, then it may be worth using or buying it. The same would be true if we could say with certainty that teachers would really benefit by having their workload reduced. For example, or because their professional abilities or quality of life would somehow be enhanced. There is no point in spending large amounts of money unless we are convinced that our students' lives will be changed for the better by what we are proposing to acquire. Question number 3. Why is it the best way to do this? The really big question we have to ask ourselves is whether the thing we are considering has a justifiable claim to be something special. A piece of software or an application may be really attractive and exciting. It may seem very appealing to have our students watch YouTube videos, play computer games, or travel into a virtual world such as Second Life, but we have to ask ourselves what is achieved by such activities. If we can help our students to learn what we are teaching them more effectively without using modern technology, then it doesn't seem to make sense to use all the flashing lights when we could spend our time in better ways. What teachers have to evaluate, in other words, is whether the dazzle of new technology is matched by the benefits that come from its use, or whether, on the contrary, the same effect can be achieved without it. Question number 4. Does it pass the T-test? If teachers are expected to adopt a new procedure or use a new piece of technology, it needs to pass the T-test. T stands for training. Unless teachers and students are given training opportunities to try out the new thing, its introduction and use in the classroom will sometimes fail. E, on the other hand, stands for the whole area of equipment. We need to be sure that the new procedure or hardware, for example, is properly supported technologically. We have all heard situations where the installation of large new digital system has been bedeviled by software glitches and hardware failures. That is why we need to be sure that such systems are properly supported by qualified professionals, that we have someone to turn to when an entire system starts failing. We should not underestimate the absolute need for teachers to be sure that the equipment is appropriate, is in place, and is properly supported by qualified professionals. Finally, A stands for access. We have to take students down a long corridor to a computer room that has to be booked 3 weeks in advance. Then the whole idea becomes significantly less attractive. These considerations apply equally if the students are using their own mobile devices. We need to be sure that they all have appropriate devices and that, where necessary, they can afford to use them for some of the tasks we are asking them to do. However, our students do not all have their own devices. We need to be sure at least that they can all be near enough to someone else's devices to take part in the activity. Question number 5. What's the TITO ratio? TITO stands for time in, time out. We have to ensure that the time spent setting up the equipment we are going to use or getting the students to access a website or an app on their smartphones or tablets is in proportion to the time that the students spend benefiting from the activity. In other words, we don't want them to spend 20 minutes getting something ready only to find that the activity only takes 3 minutes to be completed. Last question would be, how can we make it work? After reading questions 1 to 5 above, it may seem as we are suggesting that teachers should be somewhat skeptical about new ideas and technologies. And in general, we should reject the new in favor of the old. However, this is far from the truth, and instant rejection is just as deadening as instant acceptance can be careless. We might go further and say that teachers do their students a greater service by embracing the changing and exciting world that we live in. Failure to do so may deny their students the best kinds of learning experience. Before rejecting any new idea or equipment, therefore, we should ask ourselves, how can we make it for us and for our students? We need to look at the best case scenario and use that to evaluate what we are being offered, not only in cynical but also in a positive light. That way, we have a chance of judging its real worth. We should also address one of the fears many teachers have, the technological malfunction. One example for this is when you have made a beautiful PowerPoint presentation and then you found out that the projector doesn't work or that the connections aren't right, all your work appears to go. Or another example is perhaps the internet connection simply won't work, or you can find the audio controls in the classroom you have been assigned to. It is not just the teachers who can feel the frustration. There is a report reported in Madrid that the children working in classrooms that were equipped by the interactive whiteboards are reported irritation on the technical malfunctions. Let's proceed with using classroom resources. In this section, we will look at some of the areas where technology can be useful. Most of these categories apply to the non-digital world too. The first one is showing things. We can show and ask our student to show things using a variety of resources ranging from the humble Blackboard to presentation software such as the PowerPoint, Keynote, and Prezi. So we may sometimes expect them to provide multimedia presentation using text, graphics, and illustrations, video, and audio. We can also expect the students to take pictures on their mobile devices and show them to their colleagues. We can also ask them to take pictures from unusual angles for their classmates to speculate about. And lastly, they can make quick videos using their mobile phones. Number 2 is sharing things and collaborating. We often encourage our students to work together because we believe that such cooperation promotes a successful language learning. The impact of digital tools on student collaboration is often highly beneficial. When students group together to make videos or plan digital presentation for the class, there is often a very high level of collaborative behavior within the group. Though, as the authors of the article point out, no technology guarantees collaboration, and collaboration in itself does not guarantee learning. So also, teachers can get their students to collaborate in Twitter and Facebook groups, or indeed any social media platforms that allow people to communicate and share information. These groups can provide an effective and accessible medium for students to use the second language outside the classroom, whether it is to complete homework tasks, assignments, or engage in friendly social interaction with group members. Number Number 3, watching and listening. With video channels like YouTube and Vimeo and any number of audio sites, there is almost no limit to what students and teachers can find on the internet. Video enthusiast Jamie Keddy is a great exponent of what he calls video telling, where getting ready to watch online videos provides the spur for language development and storytelling. Students can also see what their classmates have produced in terms of video material and audio material, which they can share on sites such as Vocaloid. Number 4 is practicing things, where students once relied on notebooks and workbooks to do practice at home. There is now a wide range of digital alternatives. Practice can take the form of cyber homework, which is essentially electronic versions of the earlier paper-based workbooks. Students can also go online to access additional reading or to take tests. Number 4 is authoring things. The digital world has greatly expanded the students' potential for authorship. Rui De Silva, for example, asked his students to create collaborative stories together using photographs they could find on their Flickr website. They assembled these into slideshows, which they then presented to the class. They can also do this kind of storytelling when the students not only write their script, but they also speak, listen to their own recording, and select the right pictures and music to enhance the appeal to their digital story. Some teachers also have their students write and respond to each other's blogs. They post their thoughts and experiences on blogs, and their classmates can leave also their comments and responses. Claudia Techtenberg and Angela Giacometti found that blogs assist in motivating the students to use language for real communicative purposes and to write in English in ways that they have not previously experienced. Number 4 is researching things. The web is extremely useful for finding things out, from the time of the train we need to catch to the latest news and etc. Most of the big publishers now have free online dictionary sites for students of English. This will give them definitions, audio clips of the words being spoken, collocation information, and etc. Some publishers now have dictionary apps for use with mobile devices. Unlike the first generation electronic dictionaries of many years ago, these can now be rich resources with a wealth of material and information. Linguists and dictionary makers also make use of language corpuses or corpora. These are huge collections of text which are written and spoken and can be searched electronically to investigate how language works. Now let's proceed with blending learning, flipped classrooms, and beyond. Because all classroom equipment and technology costs money and takes time to use, we need to be clear about some of the issues that surround the adoption of anything new, so that we can come to sensible conclusions about whether or not to adopt it and how to incorporate it in our teaching if we do. Students' access to our digital world has led some to talk about the connected classroom. We can do many of the things we have always done inside the classroom, but we also have the option of going beyond the classroom without necessarily moving up from our seats. To put it another way, we can mix the inside and outside learning worlds in what is usually referred to as blended learning. The idea of a blend is that the teacher and the student work with an interconnected mix of both classroom presentation and activities, digital resources, whether in the form of online material or embedded in apps. In this increasingly common scenario, the work that is done in class is supported sometimes, previewed or flipped, practiced, and revised online. Few examples demonstrate how blended learning works. First, we have the teacher uses the course of their own material, then contributions from the students. They will also direct the students to internet sites which have practice material design especially for the days or week's work. We have also another example when the teacher may ask the students to watch and or find a video about a topic which they are going to concentrate on in subsequent lessons. Let's proceed with the flipped classroom. One suggestion for a reshaping of the relationship between the classroom and the outside world is the flipped classroom. This is based on the observation that in many learning situations, teachers present information or language items that transmission type sessions. And then the students go home and do practice exercises and tasks by themselves as homework. In such a scenario, classrooms are where people learn things and home is where they practice them. But this may not always be the best use of time for the following reasons. Some students may understand the input and some may not. If the teacher has to explain the concept more than once, this may be wasteful in terms of time. Another one, explaining things to a whole class does not allow the teacher to work with individual students who might be having trouble. It means one size, in other words, does not fit all. Different students need different things. If, however, we turn the traditional scenario on its head so that the homework, it takes place in the lesson, but the input is offered at home, then there is a far more chance in class for the students to get the individual attention of the teacher while the practice is taking place because he or she will spend less time on teaching input. For example, we might have the students watch a video at home about the topic we have chosen, and then we would spend subsequent lesson time discussing the issue and working with the language that is used in the video. A problem arises when we consider the student's attitude to homework in general. Many teachers are familiar with a scenario where they ask their students to prepare for the next lesson. For example, watching a video, only to find out that not all of them have done it, thus interfering with their plans for the lesson when it takes place. Last one is the learning online. Some students have no alternative but to study online because they cannot attend group lessons. They have a number of options for this, ranging from private lessons using Skype. We have also online internet courses. We have also Blackboard, Canvas, and Moodle. We have also massive open online courses or MOOCs, and we have the very well-known webinars or online talks and seminars.